right. Welcome back, everyone, to the Heart Set Above podcast, a space where we strive to keep our hearts anchored above, even in a fallen world. I'm back today with my friend and my guest, Chelsea Novak. Welcome back. Great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Chelsea is a fellow autism mom, and in honor of Autism Awareness Month, we're sharing a bit of our experience as families navigating autism. In our last episode together, we really just kind of caught up as two friends who hadn't seen each other in a long time. We shared our stories. But in this episode, we're going to turn those stories kind of upward. We want to share what we've learned about God through this journey, how walking through autism in our homes has shaped and deepened our spiritual perspective. So, Chelsea, let me ask you, this is such a big, broad question, I feel like, but how has navigating autism with your child within your home shaped or changed your understanding of God?
Ooh. Gosh, I feel like autism has changed my entire world. Nothing is the same about me since this diagnosis. But I feel like I have a deeper understanding of God through learning about autism. One of the biggest things I think that has helped me to connect with God is, the Bible talks a lot about how the Holy Spirit is our advocate. And so much of the journey as a mom of autism is advocating. You're advocating all the time for your kid, for accommodations, for support, I feel like I'm his translator, I'm his, co-regulator, I'm his everything, literally. And we've been in meetings with there's 10 specialists around the table, all telling me one thing about my kid. And I think they're wrong. And I'm his mom and I need to trust my gut and I have to go against them. And all of that, it's so much advocacy. And so I've spent so much time just thinking about the Holy Spirit throughout this process and thinking about Jesus and how advocacy for Jesus was a 24/7 job. The Bible says he sit at God's right hand interceding for us. And I think of that, wow, that's what autism parents do. It's 24/7 advocating, fighting for your child and fighting for their needs and fighting for their world. And what it helps me to remember that advocating is holy work. I'm participating in something that God does. And so that when I view it that way, I feel so grateful. Wow, look at how this is able to help me understand God on such a deeper level, just because this is something that God does that I, through circumstance, now have to do so uncomfortably all the time that I wouldn't normally have to do, So that's been one of the coolest things I've learned so far.
I love that. I never put that together. I'm so glad that you shared that. You're right.
Well, you're not in school meetings yet, but that's what you will, you're not at that age
showing
yet,
me what it'll look like. Well, one thing I've really appreciated, we haven't had school meetings, but my son does have an IEP. So we have been in IEP meetings and just a couple, right? We're early in the process, but that's actually been a real, space of joy for me, not the actual meetings themselves, but just it's been so cool to have my kid be so seen in this process. I feel like autism, you're so unseen in so many ways. People misunderstand you. That was one of my biggest fears in the beginning of all of this is people are not going to know him. They're not going to understand him. Will I even know him? Will he know me?
Right.
And just the misunderstanding that people have of him, of our family, is one of, I think, the greatest pains of all of this. But one piece that's, salves that pain a little bit is that I get to go to all these specialists whose whole job is to know my son, to observe him and help me know him. And they want to know from me so that they can know him better. And so I just thought, wow, that's something I want to implement. That's something I encourage my clients to implement with their own children. Something I want to implement with my oldest is setting aside dedicated time to just think about our kids, to study them, to analyze what would meet their needs better. And am I doing everything I should be? Is there anything that we need to tweak in their care or in their resources? And so I think that's a great practice for any child, neurotypical or not, right?
Yeah.
And so that has been a real source of joy for me. But you're right. In those spaces, even as people are trying to know him, we are such advocates for our kids. And I love to think about God sitting at, the table, the IEP meeting table with me, with me next to him, advocating for me with the Spirit. So I love that visual. Thanks for sharing that, Chelsea.
Yeah. No,
So
of course.
beautiful. I think for me, going back to basics, right? I work in therapy a lot, one-on-one with
Okay.
clients, and a lot of them are Christians. And so I often ask them, what would God say about this? Or what would God say to you? Or how does God feel about you in this? And I think a lot of times, a lot of people say, he'd be upset with me. He'd be disappointed with me. He'd give me a directive, like you should have done this better, or you should be doing that. And I think my experience with Joel and navigating autism, because communication is difficult for us, he
Yes.
can't communicate with us very functionally. And I think he understands a lot of what we're saying, but he's not always plugged in to really let it hit him. So what I find is that what I say to him more often than anything else is just, I love you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like when communication is a barrier, when we don't understand each other perfectly, I just find myself going back to basics constantly. And what I say over and over is, I love you, right? And so
Mm,
I don't know why, but I kind of applied that to God and thought, communication is a big barrier between me and God. We don't speak the same language. We're not on the same level. We're not on the same
yeah.
plane. I live here in this fallen world. He's in a perfect place. He's perfect. I'm not, right? Like there's a lot of barriers to us to me perfectly understanding him. And I wonder if more often than we realize, if we, kind of reassess in a moment and think, what would God say to me right now? I really think most of the times the answer would be, I love you, right? Like that
Yes.
is the most important and the really only
Absolutely.
important message that I can communicate as a fallen parent to my son. How much more would a perfect parent only want to communicate that to me as I'm navigating my own difficulties in this world? So that has been a real, source of solace to realize that, wow, just as I would communicate the most foundational important message to my son, I really think if God and I had a moment face to face in the minute, in the difficulty of this world, he would probably just want me to know the most important thing, which is, I love you. That's the only
I
thing that
love
really
that.
matters. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think for me with communication, I think of the scripture a lot in Romans 8 where it says that the Holy Spirit intercedes for us with groanings that deep words can't express. And I think for my son, like, because my son is very verbal, but still lacks a lot of functional communication. And so that's where he has high behavioral needs. And a lot of times the behaviors are communicating. That's one thing I've learned
Mm.
and studied recently is that behavior is an autistic, because it's a communication disorder, it's an autistic person's way of communicating. And so, that's shown me a different side of God too, is like looking past someone's behavior
Amen.
and not just dealing with behavior, but thinking what are they trying to communicate? What's underlying? What's underneath the surface here? And then having the patience, the empathy to just be with my son through his behavior, through his lack of communication, through me not understanding, but just being present with him. That's another like Holy Spirit work that I feel so like honored that God has entrusted me with, because I'm like, what a deep thing. And that's so godly. And that's so how Jesus is with us, is just patiently with us in these moments when we don't have the words and we're behaving a certain way,
Yeah.
I'm like, I feel like I've learned so much about God through that too.
Yes. And his parenting style, if you will, right? Because we
Yes.
can do that as fallen parents. He can do that perfectly as our heavenly parent. But that is so in line with what I work with my clients every day, right? I think we as humans get so fixated on our behavior. I
Yeah.
sinned, I messed up, I didn't match up with my behavior. And I think that that's true, but I think we hyperfixate on that and we lose the context. But our Father, our Heavenly Father never does. And just like what you said, right? We can say to our son, that's not okay. You can't
Right.
talk like this. You can't throw that. You can't bang your head
Yeah.
against that or whatever.
Right.
The behavior misses the mark. But also we have so much compassion for what else, the context of what led you to this, right? Why you
Exactly.
interacted with that behavior. And if we can grasp that, it doesn't change the fact that they engage with a behavior that isn't okay, but it does change everything about how we interact with them in it. It's not, how dare you do that? It's not okay. Ship up or shape out. It's, let me be with you in this. Let's figure out a way to move through this together and to figure out a better way next time. If you and I can do that as imperfect parents, how much more does God do that with us? And I think as modern Western Christians, we get so fixated on the behavior. I messed up. God's disappointed
Right.
with me. I'm outside of his grace and his love. But it's so natural to think about it with our own children that we get to just be there and figure out how to accommodate their needs as we have compassion for their fallen behavior, for the behavior that missed the mark. How much more is God doing that? So I love that. That's something I've really savored too, and has really shifted my
Yeah.
perspective of God.
And I don't know if it's changed you as a therapist too. I feel like it's changed me as a minister for, not
Yes.
instead of seeing what's on the outside or seeing behavior, my instinct now is to think, well, what's behind that? What's prompting
Yes.
that? As you're learning functional communication in the autism world, it translates to so many other areas of life.
Absolutely. And I would say it's so much messier, right? Like,
Yeah.
wouldn't it be so much easier to be like, here's the behavior, here's where you fell short. A plus B did not equal C, do better next time. That is so much easier. And I think that's where a lot of kind of modern Western Christianity has gone, because it's
Hmm.
clear cut, it's black and white, it's easy. It's so much messier to be in it with them and to say, help me understand the context. It's not going to change righteousness. It's not going to change what's allowed, what's not allowed. But I
Right.
want to understand the context, be with you here, have compassion, and figure it out together. It takes so much more time, so much more effort. It's so much more
Yeah.
messy, but it is so much more holy. I think it feels so much closer to
Yes.
God and the way that he operates than just this black and white, clear cut, A plus
Yes.
B does not equal C. So yeah, it has shifted the way that the way that I am in therapy with people, but it does get significantly less clear cut when we look at it through that
Right.
lens.
Yeah. And I don't know if you had to, because you're similar like me, where we grew up with Christian parents and we grew up going to
Yes.
church, and I've had to like relearn a lot, because I can definitely, like, my natural instinct is, yeah, if my son is having a behavior, like if we're talking about it in this context, to think, okay, what will people think of this? Or what does this mean about me? Or,
Mhm.
to just think, but that's not a godly way of looking at it. I should be looking at him with compassion, or what's behind this, or how could I help him through this? And so I'm relearning that in all areas of our life, to just view people differently. And I think it's through a more godly lens, and to minister to people differently and to parent differently, all of it. And it's even a lot of the specialists are helping retrain me in this, the autism specialists that I work with, because sometimes for me, I feel a sense of lack of control as a parent, as a mom of autism, because A plus B does not equal C. Like, you can't just, I say this and they do this. Like, that does not work in the autism world, like, at all. And the specialists are helping me understand this. Like, no, you can't, like, expect certain things of
Right.
your child, and all of that. And so it's such a lack of control for me. And I realize, like, I can tend to throw a fit when I feel like I don't have control, and I want to be able to control my kids' behavior. One of the therapists actually said that to me, like, made me wrestle that thought. She was like, I think it's upsetting to you that you can't control him. And I was like, wow, is this discipling time right now? Like, what is happening? Like, yeah. But I was like, what a lesson in that. Like, yeah, I have to be okay that I can't control him, because I can't control most things in life. And there's so much God is trying to teach me through that. And I need to be a little bit more comfortable being out of control.
Yeah. I work with a lot of Christian parents, and a lot of them struggle with exactly what you're saying, a lack of control. And a lot of them say what I think a lot of autism parents say too. I did everything I was supposed to do. I read all the books.
Mm-hmm.
I offered the resources, the interventions. I disciplined the way that I should have, and it didn't turn out the way that I expected it to. And I always bring it back to grief, right? We're grieving the loss of an expectation we had over our child's life or behavior. And we need to move through that so that we can accept what is and then ask, now what? How do I move forward in this reality? And I think as autism parents, we have had to be so trained in that kind of surrender. We've
Yes.
had to grieve. We've had to mourn. We've had to take away the expectation, the outcome as our measure of success, because we have no control over the outcome.
Yeah,
But
it's
our
so
measure
true.
of
It's so
success
frustrating.
it is so frustrating. But the measure of success has had to become, can I connect with my child through this and
Yes.
help them
Right.
as much as I have control over? And that is so hard for humans because we want that control. And when we invest in something, we want to see the outcome that we expected when we were investing. And I think as autism parents, we've just been so trained. Like we've been on this course. We have these big muscles in this area to be like, I'm going to do all that I can. I have no idea what the outcome is going to be because I just don't have control over that. People are going to misunderstand me. They're going to judge me. This is going to be hard. I know how to grieve it, but I have to surrender the outcome. And my goal has to be connecting and doing the best I can with the limited control that I have. And I really think that as Christians, that is so far from our natural perspective. Like you said, I grew up in church, a preacher's kid, the fishbowl, everything. And
Mm-hmm.
the focus was the behavioral outcomes specifically. And I
Right.
think that one thing I've learned, just not just about God's compassion toward me in my own functioning, that he wants to understand the context and connect with me. That's his main goal in my relationship with him. But also that can become my main goal, that I don't have control over the outcome of my client's behavioral and emotional functioning, your ministry, where
Right.
each person goes, their behavior, et cetera, even our children. We do
Mm-hmm.
have control over how we connect with them through it, how we strive to know them, and how we connect with God through it. And that's pretty much all we have control over.
I love that. Yeah. One of the passages that I've been thinking about recently that's really encouraged me is the interaction between Jesus. It's in Mark 9. It's with a father and a son who's he's deaf and mute, and the father says he throws himself into the fire and so it reminds me of autism,
Mhm.
because of the lack of communication skills and the
Yeah.
safety concerns, which is something we've
Yeah.
been talking about. And you see this dad come up to Jesus just desperate. And it's interesting because even before that, the disciples, it says they tried to help and they couldn't, and they were arguing about. And I'm like,
Yeah.
you see that so much in the medical or autism world of like all these opinions
This
and
is
all
the
this
way.
arguing.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then the father just desperately comes to Jesus and says, if you can you save him? And Jesus says, like, Jesus challenges his faith. And I think of that, for me, this has been the biggest challenge in my faith, autism parenting. And that is, it does, because it's so much surrender, so much constant trusting, constant fear, constant guilt, all of that. And I think I almost wonder, like, reading that passage now, like if what Jesus is saying, that the disciples, the reason they couldn't drive it out is because, maybe they just weren't praying. Like it says you couldn't because this kind of only comes out through prayer, but maybe it more so means like we need constant prayer for situations like this. Like I, as an autism mom, need to stay in a posture of prayer because it's not just going to go away. It's going to keep developing and looking different through time, how we talked about in the last episode. But I need to rely so deeply on God to have this kind of faith to be able to
Yes.
continue to go to Jesus with my son.
I love that. There really are so many parallels in that story. I never
Right?
realized. Wow.
I know.
Yes, that is so. Maybe he had autism, and that's, I don't
Right?
know.
I'm trying to like low key look for
Diagnose
people
everybody in the Bible.
who are autistic in the Bible. Yeah. To glean things. And this story, I was like, this one fits.
For sure. That's so
Mm-hmm.
funny. We're going to have, maybe that's another, like a book to write one day, is to
Yeah,
diagnose.
I love
Paul would be
that. Right.
diagnosed with this and Peter with that. That is so funny. Well, I think
Yeah.
um, I've used this metaphor before to describe this measure of surrender that as autism parents we've had to get to, and this lack of control. And a lot of people have not been happy with this metaphor, and it probably needs some refinement, but in the interest of just being raw and real here, I'll share it with you.
Totally.
This is what I equate it to. When we bought our first ever brand new car, it was our minivan that we bought. I still drive it now, but when it was brand new, I remember being so careful about where I parked, and I would park far away, and I would park 2 spaces away from anyone because I was trying to avoid it getting scratched, right? And then I remember when it got its first scratch, and I was equally devastated and relieved because I no longer had to be so hyper vigilant about trying to
Right.
protect it from being scratched, right? But I was also really sad that I was scratched. And that is kind of how I feel with Joel's autism is I think becoming a parent for the first time with my oldest, and I see this in therapy all the time with Christian parents, we kind of have this illusion of control. If I just pray enough, if I just discipline enough, if I have enough devotionals with my kids, I can protect them from fallenness. Like I can protect them from being affected by the effects of a broken, fallen world. And that becomes our expectation in our parenting. I can protect
Right.
them. And then they get to the teenage years or the early adult years and they see, oh, my kid was affected by fallenness, even though I did everything right. Then they become disillusioned with their faith, with their God. They become filled with guilt and shame and all these things, right? And so, in the same way that I equate it to my first brand new car being scratched, I think with Joel, he doesn't have any more fallenness than any other human,
Right.
but his fallenness is more obvious to the naked eye,
Yes.
right? His
It's
can
out
be
loud.
seen.
Yeah.
It's out
That's
loud.
how I like to
Exactly.
say it. Yeah.
Exactly. His autism out loud, right? Like his
Mhm.
fallenness, it lives out loud. Other people can see it more readily, even though it's the same amount of fallenness that I experience. It just looks different. And there is actually some relief in that for me. There's grief in it, just like when I got that scratch on my car. Obviously, that's a minor, example, and this is so much bigger because it has to do with my kid. But there is grief in the fallenness that he experiences and the pain of that fallenness that he experiences. There's also a little bit of relief in this illusion of control shattering in my mind and
Yeah.
heart to realize I actually don't have control over either of my kids or any other human over the level of pain that they feel from the brokenness of this world and the effects of it in their own life. And that is so sad, but it's also relieving to know that there's no amount of effort that I can put in to make it turn out differently. So that naturally leads me to surrender, which is a difficult place, but a lighter place to say, okay, God, I have no control here. I have to stay connected with you. I can only focus on what is in my control. And I have to let go everything else that's not in my control. So that has been a difficult lesson, but a really powerful one to see that I don't even want to waste time and effort and anxiety on what's not in my control. I have to surrender that to God. All I can do is focus what is in my control, which is very limited. And in order to do that, I have to maintain a posture of surrender and connection to God.
I love that. And I think that's just so it takes off layers of judgment again of
Yeah.
like, obviously we're still going to do all the therapies and all the things we need to do to give our kid the best shot. But letting go of that outcome is so freeing. And imagine if we could do that for all parenting. Like, I
Right.
think in the Christian world, there's a high judgment standard of parenting. Like, if you're kid grows up and has different beliefs or different, like, what did you do wrong? And I think
Exactly.
when you're an autism parent, all that goes out the window because it's like you literally, we
Always
had
that.
so many specialists tell us, you guys are amazing parents. And we're like, are you kidding me? Like, I don't, are you sure? Because
Yeah.
look at what we're dealing with. But it just shows you like, so I try to even apply that same grace to all communities around me in neurotypical parenting. And I'm like, there's only so much we can do
There's
as
only
as
so much we have
humans.
control over. Yeah, it's so true. And it's sad, but also relieving. You're right.
Right.
Um, anything else come up for you? What autism has taught you about God?
Okay. I think one thing, how God meets us where we're at, that really, I think of that in the autism world. Like, I think one misconception about autism is that because there's a lack of social awareness that they don't care about relationships. And I think that's a huge misconception. And I've read about that too, that autistic kids do care about relationship. They care about connection. It just looks entirely differently. And I think for me, I spent so much time with my son frustrated in my lack of being able to connect with him. And I would try to do things like get him out into the world and let's do this activity together. Let's do this to try to connect with him. And one day, I don't even know what got me here, but one day it just clicked and connected with me that like, oh, I have to enter his world. Like, I can't like expect him to come out into my world and us to connect that way. Like, autism is its own world and I need to enter his world. And what I realized with my son is the best way I can connect with him is through video games. That's his passion. He loves video games. Anytime, like, I can't have a conversation with him usually about his day or school, but we could talk about video games. Like he will use all the language for video games. And so I just kind of decided I hate video games, honestly. Like I just don't, I think they're silly. Like I decided like I am not allowed to hate video games anymore. I'm going to have to become a gamer mom. Like if I want a relationship with my son, I'm going to have to enter his world. And so he made a gaming account for me. It's called Gamer Mom, I think. And we play video games together. And whenever I want to connect with him, I enter that world. And I've taken away the expectation for him to meet me where I'm at and to give me what I would like to connect. But in entering his world, I've found so much joy. I love the way his face lights up when he talks about games, the way like it brings out all his creativity, all his passion. Like, so I've learned so much from entering his world, and I've gained so much and actually like video games now. And, but mostly I like connecting with him. But that's been a big thing is I'm like, wow, that is God with us. Is God does not just wait in the corner. Like, all right, are you ready to seek me now? You better come over here. Like he finds us and he meets us where we're at and he enters our world. And then when we interact back with him, that's when we find all the joy and all the completeness in a relationship with God. And so I've really enjoyed that lesson as well.
I love that. Even just to hear you talk about like, oh, I love the way his face lights up. And all of your joy is coming from not video games themselves, although now there's some enjoyment in them. But the joy is coming from your connection with your son and learning him more and seeing him more and connecting with him more. And I love to think about God in that same vein, right? That, okay, of course, we know. I think sometimes we lose touch with the fact that God is a God that accommodates, that enters our world. He literally entered our world in human flesh, died so that we could have a relationship with him. So I think he's shown over and over, I am not a God, like you said, in this lofty place that makes you come up to me. I think there is a boundary in God's love for us. There's always a boundary, even in unconditional love, where he says, I'm going to come 99% of the way, but you still have to come that 1%. So I do think there is that boundary, but we see he is a God that really accommodates in such an incredible, egregious way, right? Like even entering literally our world. So I love that. But I love even more to think about that face that you just had talking about your son and lighting up, to think about him lighting up about it. I think I love to think about God savoring that joy of seeing our faces light up when he comes into our world, when we get to connect with him. Because I do think that is his joy, obviously, is to connect with us, not to have us meet these lofty expectations he has of us. Obviously, he doesn't need us to do anything for him. But I think his joy, his true hope is that we will connect with him and get to know him. And it's because he wants to know us, in that same face that you had thinking, I love to see my son light up, that he thinks about us when he proverbially lays his head on the pillow at night, right? Like, oh, I love to see Chelsea's face when, she realized this about me, or when she had that thought about me. So I think that's such a misconception that we have as modern Christians, that we have to, like we were talking about, meet those behavioral expectations. When really, I think in a lot of ways, God is like, you so misunderstand me. I just want to connect. I want to see that look on your face when you're so excited about something, or realize how much I love you. And if we just knew that, how much could that change our interaction with God, our connection with him? So I love that you shared that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, no, I love that too, thinking about God feeling that way about me. Thank you for that reminder.
Yeah. I think one thing for me that I've noticed, is the last one on my list here that I kind of wrote out, is, well, first, let me just say, on the whole accommodating us and meeting us where we're at, I also really love the example of Jesus in the Bible. I think about it all the time, because accommodating our kids, though joyful, is also really hard.
Yes.
And really exhausting and really grief-worthy and really anxiety-provoking. And so there are times throughout my day, as I'm trying to accommodate my kids, where I think, oh, how much longer do I have to do this? How much more of me is this going to take? And I always think about that part of Jesus's journey on this earth, where
Yeah.
he is talking with his disciples and he kind of looks, I imagine that he kind of looks up to heaven and he's like, how long must I put up with these people? And I love that so human experience that even Jesus, in his perfect love, his perfect parenting of us, could have experienced the same level of exhaustion and weariness that I experience, especially as an autism mom. So I really love that bond that me and Jesus share, when sometimes I'm
Yes.
like, how long must I be, in this position? How long must I put up with this when I'm just feeling so weary? I love that I serve a God who gets that, but who also continues to meet me where I'm at. And I hope to continue to do that with my kids. So God and I laugh over that a lot together. I'm like,
I love
how long must I
that.
put up with these
It's
people?
that's so relatable.
My
Yes.
family. I've
Right?
thought it about my husband. I've thought it about my kids.
Oh, yeah.
I've thought it about the cashier
Of
at the grocery store.
course.
How long?
Yeah.
Um, but the last thing that was on my list here was just, we kind of talked about it in the last episode, just that unbidden out loud existence, right? That I'm obsessed with Eden. Everything I do revolves around looking at it through the lens of Eden, what we were created for, living outside of Eden, and therefore living in this discrepancy of how we were made to exist. And I think in a lot of ways, Joel embodies this existence that is so much closer in some ways to this Edenic level of existence, right? This
Right.
unbidden out loud, uh, true, vulnerable, what you see is what you get. I really think that's so much closer to how God wanted us to exist, in this true state of vulnerability, naked and unashamed. And I think I feel so, in a way, jealous of my son in that way. I have this video of him running through this meadow, kind of this yard, and he's like running with this pure expression of joy, and he's like flipping over in the grass. And to the naked eye, especially if you were a little bit older, I think people would be like, what's wrong with that kid? He's frolicking in the meadow. That's something you talk about but you don't actually do, or it's something you see in a movie but not in reality. But I think I want to live that way. Like, I want to live that unbidden, that out loud, that raw and vulnerable and exposed, and still so confident in the way that I'm loved and my worth and my value before God. And I think in a lot of ways, Joel is so much more in touch with that than I am. He's only 4, and I know we have a long journey ahead of us to make him stay connected to that reality. But yeah, I think that's been a real silver lining, a real piece of joy that I've been able to savor and learn from Joel, in that I want to be more raw and real and vulnerable in my own existence.
I love that. And I do think like that is, I think, my favorite quality of autism, if I could say it that way. And I see with my son too, just such a sometime I know I shared in the last podcast about how there is some insecurity now that he's entering that age where he's realizing like, oh, I'm not typical in that sense, or the world was not designed for me, or like school doesn't work for me. Like, yes, there's insecurity, but I also really admire his security and confidence and his ability to just be who he is. And like yesterday, he got on stage in front of our church and sang a song and had a zero embarrassment. Zero. And I'm like, that's so amazing to me. And I think about how happy that must make God to see his creation fully themselves. I think God would desire and wish for each of us to have that level of self-acceptance and self-comfort where it's like, this is who I am. And, when it's time to melt down, I'm a meltdown. When it's time to like all of that, I love that quality about him. And there's so much humor in the day-to-day life with it as well. Like this weekend, my dad gave Bradley some money because he was going to go to the movies. So my dad gave him some extra snacks. And even just his instincts, it's so pure-hearted and sweet, but he just runs around waving the money, just, I got money. And I was like, well, Bradley, what should you say? And he was like, bye. Like, cause and I was like, no, what else can you say? Oh, thank you. Yeah. Like, but it's not a rudeness. It's just this, like, I cannot contain my joy and my excitement about, and I love that and appreciate that. And I'm grateful that I have a family where we can all just like appreciate that also. And yes, we're working on thank you and all that, but also I'm grateful for just his self-expression. And so much of me thinks as a parent, I want Tyler to learn that too. I want Tyler to just be totally himself. And, that's my neurotypical child. And I don't want him just to be focused on politeness with me or saying things the right way. Or I want him to I want to see all his joy, all his pain. Like I want all of him completely as he is. And so I think God feels that way of all of us. And I think that's a blessing, a godly quality in autism is that ability to be completely authentic without reservation.
I love even how you just said that, even with your neurotypical child, your younger one, Tyler, right? I don't care if you're having a meltdown. I just want to know you exactly as you are. And I think as Christians, we think we have to polish up our behavior, or our emotions before we can approach God. And I think God's like, no, you can approach my throne of grace with confidence because I love you and I just want to know you exactly as you are. And you're right. There's something about autism that just makes you a little bit more in touch with that. And I've loved to see that. I've even thought several times my life would be so much easier if I had a touch of autism, where I could just say exactly what I think and feel and not have to beat around the bush because of cultural norms and, being worried about people's feelings. If I could just be like, bye, I gotta spend this money now, What do you say? Bye. If I could have a little bit of that, that would help me out a lot. So yeah, I'm grateful for this journey that God has put us both on. And I'm so grateful for you, Chelsea, being on today and putting some of that journey on display for others. Was there anything that we didn't get to that you wanted to share? Anything that you wanted to make us aware of in your journey here?
Don't think so. I'm looking one more time through my notes, but this has been so awesome and so special. Yeah, I'm grateful
for sure.
Yeah, I know. So great to catch up and really helpful to talk to another autism mom, even though each journey is so different. There's a lot of the core struggles of autism and parenting are the same. And so it's really helpful just to talk through with someone who listens. And I don't know about you, but I feel like it's amazing how much time this life requires, like how many phone calls and getting on the wait list and doctor's appointments and all of that. And that it's so taxing. And so sometimes, like when I'm asked, like, how was your week? I'm like, I don't have words, and so, but to be able to talk with someone who is also living that life, and I know I don't have to explain that, is really helpful because it's a unique life we're living, but also very special. And we love our kids.
It's true. And I think in a lot of ways, it's such a lonely life. I think anyone going through anything difficult can say that about their own experience. So I certainly don't mean this is the only lonely existence that someone can live. But it is really lonely because we live in a neurotypical world and we're navigating neurodivergence, and it feels like we're swimming upstream, and it's exhausting and wearisome, and we're afraid and we feel guilty and we feel ashamed and we feel judged and we feel insecure and all these things, right? And we're also finding joys in it and trying to stay connected to our kids. There's just so much to navigate. And so I think in a lot of ways it can make you feel really lonely. And I think that's only exacerbated by the fact that sometimes we do actually need to literally pull back from things in our lives to devote enough time and energy to do what we need to do for our kids. So I agree. It's so nice to connect with a fellow autism mom who just gets it without having to explain all of that to someone. But I am really grateful that we also serve a God who also gets it and who just wants to connect with us in that loneliness, and to connect over that as sisters in the faith, as friends, as autism moms, where we can talk about how much we've learned about God and his parenting toward us and his perspective of us, makes it feel even less lonely navigating. Not only that you get it, you get the life, but you also get God in a way that has, in a way that this life has shaped, is lessening that loneliness by the minute. So thank you so much for being on with me, Chelsea, and sharing
it's cool to think too about how much God wants us all to learn from the autistic community. That's what I'm getting from this time too. There's so many godly qualities in this life and in autism, that it's cool how it really makes us more godly when we learn to lean in to that world.
And that really is the staple of this ministry of Heart Set Above, is we need to mourn that we're not in Eden, but also find the joys and the best way to move through this fallen world. I feel like that's exactly
Mhm.
what we talked about today with autism. We've mourned it. We continue to mourn it. We will never not mourn it.
Right.
And yet we have to find a way to find the joy, to connect with our kids and to advocate for them, to, live this life as best we can with the difficulties that God has allowed to be in our paths. And I feel like that is exactly the call of every Christian outside of Eden is mourn it, grieve it constantly. You'll never not mourn it, and surrender what you don't have control over, just like we have to do with our kids. And then find out, now what? How can I navigate this reality as best I can? So I do think there are so many parallels to us living outside of Eden as Christians, to us as autism parents. And I love that we can connect those dots a little bit today. So thank you, listeners, for being on with us. Thank you, Chelsea,
Yes,
for
thank
being on
you.
with me. And we will
Thank
see you next
you.
time.